Welcome, friends, to our channel, Bedtime Chronicles, where history, legend, and myth come alive to guide you through the stories of our ancient world. Today, we invite you to journey with us into one of the most famous and tragic sagas ever told, the Trojan War. A tale of gods and mortals, of passion and betrayal, of heroism and destruction. If you enjoy these epic stories, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us bring more myths, legends, and forgotten histories to light. And if you'd like, leave a comment below. Who is your favorite hero of the Trojan War? Now, let us step back into an age of wonder, where the seeds of a great war were sown not upon a battlefield, but at a wedding feast. It began with a union between a mortal and a goddess, Peleus, a hero of Thessaly, and Thetis, a sea nymph of dazzling beauty. Their wedding was to be a grand celebration upon Mount Pelion, attended by gods, demigods, and mortal kings alike. Zeus himself blessed the marriage, and all Olympus rejoiced, all save one. Eris, goddess of discord, had been denied an invitation. Furious at this insult, she came anyway, unseen, unbidden, and in her hand she carried a gift, a golden apple. Upon the apple a single inscription gleamed, for the fairest. She cast the apple into the midst of the feast, and at once the seeds of strife took root. The goddesses, Hera, Athena, and Aphrodite, each laid claim to the prize. A quarrel broke out, so fierce that it threatened to disrupt the harmony of Olympus itself. Seeking to end the dispute, Zeus refused to judge between them. Instead, he chose a mortal, Paris, Prince of Troy, to decide who among the goddesses was most worthy of the apple. Paris, known for his beauty but not for his wisdom, was brought to a quiet glade upon Mount Ida, where the three goddesses appeared before him. Each sought to sway his decision with a promise. Hera, queen of the gods, offered him power, dominion over all of Asia. Athena, goddess of wisdom and war, promised him victory in battle and glory beyond compare. And Aphrodite offered him the love of the most beautiful woman in the world. Paris, swayed by desire, chose Aphrodite. And so, the apple was hers, and the doom of Troy was sealed. For the most beautiful woman in the world was Helen, queen of Sparta. And her heart would soon be drawn to Paris, kindled by Aphrodite's magic, setting into motion a chain of events that would end in fire, blood, and ruin. Thus were sown the seeds of the Trojan War. With Aphrodite's promise fresh in his heart, Paris set sail from Troy, bound for Sparta. There he would claim the prize that had been pledged to him, the most beautiful woman in the world. Paris was welcomed as a guest by King Menelaus, ruler of Sparta, and by Helen herself. The city's laws of hospitality were sacred, and Paris, though a stranger, was treated with honor and generosity. Helen was indeed as wondrous as legend told. Her beauty shone like the dawn, and men said that no woman born of mortal blood could match her grace. Yet beneath the peace of the Spartan court, the god's design was unfolding. Menelaus, trusting his guest, soon departed on a journey to Crete, leaving Helen and Paris beneath the same roof. And in that time, whether by the will of Aphrodite or by Paris's own charm, Helen's heart was swayed. Some say she went willingly, longing for adventure and passion beyond the walls of Sparta. Others claim she was enchanted, or that Paris, bold with desire, stole her away in the night. Whatever the truth, Helen left her home, her daughter, and her husband, and sailed with Paris across the wine-dark sea toward Troy. When Menelaus returned and found his halls empty of his queen, his rage knew no bounds. He called upon his brother Agamemnon, king of mighty Mycenae, and together they summoned the kings of Greece. For Helen had once been the prize of many suitors, and all had sworn an oath to protect the man she chose. Now that oath would bind them to war, a war to reclaim Helen and to punish Troy for its treachery. And so, the storm began to gather. Across the land, messengers rode, calling heroes to arms. The greatest names of the age, Odysseus of Ithaca, swift-footed Achilles, Ajax the mighty, Diomedes the fierce, all would be drawn into the coming conflict. When Menelaus brought his grief before Agamemnon, the high king of Mycenae did not hesitate. Agamemnon, proud and ambitious, saw in this quarrel not only the chance to avenge his brother's honor, but also the opportunity to unite the might of all Greece under his command. From his great hall, Agamemnon sent out heralds across the lands, to every city and every shore where kings and warriors held sway. The call went forth, to gather at Aulis, to sail east, and to bring destruction upon Troy. And so the heroes of Greece answered. First came Achilles, son of the sea goddess Thetis, and the mortal king Peleus, a warrior unmatched in speed, strength, and fury. Though but a youth, his name already stirred awe and fear. Beside him came Patroclus, his loyal companion and dearest friend. Odysseus of Ithaca was next, famed for his cunning mind and silver tongue. At first, he tried to avoid the war, for he loved his home and newborn son, but the oath he had sworn bound him, and the trickery of Agamemnon's men left him no choice. From Salamis came Ajax, towering and mighty, second only to Achilles in battle's art. His shield was as vast as a wall, and none could stand before his spear. Old Nestor of Pylos joined as well, wise, aged, and full of tales of past wars. Though his strength had faded, his counsel would guide the Greeks in the years ahead. Diomedes, young king of Argos, renowned for his bold heart and fierce blade, came eager for glory, his eyes set upon honor and conquest. And so, from every corner of the Greek world, ships and warriors gathered, a host of kings and heroes, their sails filled by the winds of fate. Together they would forge an army unlike any seen before, an army bound for Troy and for destiny. The Greek fleet, 1,000 ships strong, set sail from Aulis, their black hulls cutting through the waves as they crossed the Aegean Sea. Warriors filled the decks, their minds set on vengeance and glory, their hearts stirred by the promise of battle. But the journey was not without trials. At the island of Tenedos, near the shores of Troy, the fleet paused, uncertain of the path ahead. It was then that a prophecy was revealed. Troy would not fall without the bow and arrows of Heracles. These sacred weapons had been entrusted to Philoctetes, a noble archer who had sailed with the host. Yet misfortune had already struck Philoctetes. On the journey, a serpent had bitten his foot. The wound festered and stank, and the pain drove him to madness. His cries troubled the warriors, and in their fear and revulsion, they abandoned him on the lonely island of Lemnos, leaving behind both the man and the weapons upon which victory would one day depend. When at last the Greeks reached the shores of Troy, they leapt from their ships with spears and shields ready. The Trojans met them on the beach, and the first blood of the long war was spilled. Among the first to fall was Protesilaus, a Greek prince who, according to fate, was doomed as the first to set foot upon Trojan soil. His courage cost him his life, but his sacrifice inspired the host to press forward. The Trojans, driven back, sought refuge behind their great walls, walls said to have been built by the gods themselves. And so began the long siege, as the Greeks pitched their tents upon the plain and prepared for a war that would stretch for 10 bitter years. As the siege wore on, the Greeks clashed again and again with the warriors of Troy, their battles fierce and unending. But it was not the sword of Hector, nor the strength of Troy's walls that soon threatened the Greek cause. It was pride and anger, born within their own camp. In the spoils of war, Agamemnon had claimed for himself a captive woman named Chryseis, but her father, a priest of Apollo, came humbly to ransom her. When Agamemnon cruelly refused, the priest prayed to his god. Apollo heard, and in answer, plague fell upon the Greek host, a pestilence that struck down warrior and servant alike. The army, desperate, urged Agamemnon to relent. At last he agreed to release Chryseis, but in his bitterness he took another prize to ease his wounded pride. Briseis, a woman whom Achilles had claimed in battle and loved. This insult cut Achilles to the heart. His rage burned hotter than any fire, and his pride would not bear the slight. He withdrew from the fight, refusing to lead his men, the Myrmidons, into battle. He swore to his mother Thetis that he would not return to the field until the Greeks felt the full measure of their folly. Without Achilles, the tide of war turned. The Trojans, heartened by the absence of their fiercest foe, pressed the Greeks hard, driving them back toward their ships, and the balance of the siege began to shift. As the Trojans pressed the Greeks back toward the sea, despair gripped the Achaean camp. The walls they built to protect their ships trembled beneath the onslaught, and the flame of hope flickered low. Patroclus, dearest companion of Achilles, could bear the sight no longer. He went to his friend, pleading for aid. But Achilles, unbending in his wrath, refused to return to battle. Yet he granted Patroclus a single favor, to wear his armor and lead the Myrmidons into the fight. Clad in the shining bronze of Achilles, Patroclus rode into the fray. At the sight, the Greeks rallied, believing their greatest warrior had at last returned. The Trojans, struck with fear, fell back from the ships, and the tide of battle shifted once more. Patroclus drove the enemy before him, his spear felling many a Trojan warrior. In his fervor, he forgot Achilles' warning to drive the Trojans from the ships, but not to scale the walls of Troy. Blinded by victory, Patroclus pursued the fleeing foe to the very gates of the city. There, his fate awaited. Hector, prince of Troy and champion of its people, met him in single combat. The two clashed beneath the towering walls. At last, Hector struck Patroclus down, driving his spear through the borrowed armor. The Greek fell, his life ebbing away, and with his dying breath he foretold Hector's doom at the hands of Achilles. The death of Patroclus would ignite a fury greater than any before, a fury that would bring ruin to Troy. As the long years of war ground on, Troy and the Greeks endured sorrow upon sorrow, but none greater than the duel between two of the mightiest heroes ever to walk the earth. After the death of Patroclus, Achilles cast aside his wrath against Agamemnon. Grief consumed him, and a hunger for vengeance drove him to return to battle. His heart burned only for one thing, the death of Hector, slayer of his dearest friend. Achilles' rage was terrible to behold. He shone in armor forged by the god Hephaestus, a gift from his mother Thetis. His shield gleamed like the sun, and upon it was etched the whole of mortal life, cities at peace, cities at war, the fields and seas. Armed thus, he sped toward the walls of Troy, and none could stand before him. At last, Hector came forth, knowing that fate demanded this final stand. He alone remained between Achilles and the gates of the city. The two heroes faced each other beneath the high towers of Troy, watched by friend and foe alike, by Priam and Hecuba upon the walls, by the gods from high Olympus. Hector's courage did not falter, though his heart was heavy. He knew his doom had come. 3 times he circled the city in flight, with Achilles in pursuit, swift as the north wind. But at last, Hector turned to face his fate. The two clashed in single combat, spear against spear, shield against shield. The earth shook with the fury of their blows. Achilles, driven by wrath, struck Hector down, his spear piercing the Trojan's neck. As Hector lay dying, he pleaded for mercy, that his body might be returned to his family for proper rites. But Achilles, blinded by rage, refused. He bound Hector's lifeless form to his chariot and dragged it around the walls of Troy, to the horror of those who loved him. For days, Hector's body was dishonored, until at last Priam, guided by Hermes, came in secret to the Greek camp. The old king fell at Achilles' feet, kissed his hands, those terrible hands that had slain his son, and begged for the body's return. Moved at last by pity, Achilles relented, and Hector was given funeral rites worthy of a hero. Yet Achilles' own doom was close. From his birth, Thetis had sought to make her son invulnerable. When he was but an infant, she had dipped him into the sacred waters of the river Styx. Wherever the water touched, his flesh became hardened against all harm. But the heel by which she held him did not touch the water, and so remained mortal flesh, his one point of weakness. In the end, it was this small flaw that brought his death. Paris, aided by Apollo, fired a shaft that struck Achilles in that very heel. The arrow pierced deep, and the great warrior fell. Thus perished the pride of the Greeks, mourned by friend and foe alike. With Achilles gone and the war still raging, the Greeks despaired. It was then that Odysseus, ever cunning, ever bold, proposed a final stratagem. Force had failed, but guile might succeed. He spoke of building a great wooden horse, hollow within, a marvel to inspire both fear and wonder. Inside it would hide their finest warriors. The Greeks would pretend to abandon the siege, leaving the horse as a gift to Athena, the goddess of war and wisdom, in hopes of securing safe passage home. The plan was daring. The Greeks worked in secret, felling the tallest pines of Mount Ida and fashioning from them the immense figure of a horse. Its sides were broad and strong, capable of hiding men within its belly. The legs were thick as trees, the head adorned with carved ears and flaring nostrils. The work completed, the warriors chosen for the task, among them Odysseus, Menelaus, and Diomedes, climbed within. The remaining army burned their tents, boarded their ships, and sailed out of sight, though in truth they hid behind the nearby Isle of Tenedos. At dawn, the Trojans found the plain empty, the Greek fleet vanished. All that remained was the massive horse, standing silent before the gates. Rejoicing, the Trojans believed at last the siege was over. But not all were deceived. Laocoon, a priest of Poseidon, stood before the horse and cried out in warning, "Do not trust the Greeks, even bearing gifts." He urged his people to burn the horse where it stood, but as he spoke, two monstrous serpents rose from the sea. Whether sent by the gods or by the will of fate, none could say. The serpents seized Laocoon and his sons, crushing them in their coils before vanishing beneath the waves. The Trojans, horrified, saw this as a sign that the horse was sacred, and Laocoon's warnings were silenced in blood. Cassandra, too, the daughter of Priam, gifted with prophecy but cursed never to be believed, saw the doom that lurked within the horse. She begged her people to destroy it, to see reason, but her words were dismissed as the ravings of madness. The gates were opened, and with great effort the horse was dragged into the city. That night the Trojans feasted and sang, celebrating what they believed to be victory at last. When darkness covered the city and all lay in deep sleep, Sinon, the Greek left behind, released the warriors from the horse. They slipped silently through the streets, slaying the sentries and opening the gates to the returning army. Troy awoke too late. The city burned, the temples fell, and its people were slaughtered or enslaved. Priam was struck down upon his altar. The towers of Troy crumbled into ruin, and the proud city was no more. The fires of Troy smoldered long after the final blow was struck. The Greeks, having secured their bitter victory, gathered what spoils they could and set sail for home. But the gods, enraged by the cruelty shown during the sack of Troy, the desecration of temples, the slaughter of innocents, had not yet finished with them. For many, the voyage home, known to the ancients as Nostos, became a journey of ruin. The Trojan War left its mark not only on those who fought, but on all who came after. For centuries, poets, bards, and playwrights wove its tragedies into their works. From Homer's Iliad and Odyssey to the plays of Euripides and Sophocles, the war's heroes and horrors lived on. The ruins of Troy became a symbol of the rise and fall of nations, of the cost of pride and wrath, of the fickle favor of the gods. And even today, the story of Troy stirs the imagination, a reminder of a time when gods and men walked the same path, and the choices of a few shaped the destiny of all. If you've enjoyed this journey through legend and history, we invite you to support our channel. Please like this video, leave a comment sharing your thoughts or favorite moments from the tale of Troy, and subscribe so you won't miss our next adventure into the myths of the ancient world. Your support keeps these stories alive.